This is the To Health With That, Naturally Healthy in No Time podcast for big health topics taken in small bites. I'm your host, naturopathic Dr. Amy Newsel, and this is Season 1, all about the MTHFR mutation. Today, I want to talk a little bit about depression. So depression is a common thread among all humans. This is not at all limited to MTHFR folks in any way. So we always hear about neurotransmitters and depression, so much so that I feel we overlook the fact that there are other possible contributing factors. The assumption becomes that if you're depressed, your neurotransmitters must be off somehow, and if we fix those neurotransmitters, voila, we fix the depression. The problem is, that theory doesn't actually pan out for a lot of people, especially MTHFR people. So it has a lot of merit to explore other causes of depression as well, especially when so many of them are fixable. MTHFR does, of course, affect neurotransmitters via the BH4 pathway, but my experience clinically has been that balancing all of the other things goes a lot farther than just a pill for a neurotransmitter in most people. So many factors play into depression, and some of these are related to MTHFR, and some aren't. But before I tell you about those, I want to tell you about an MTHFR beta course that I'm offering, and it is free for listeners. So email me if you're interested, Amy, A-M-Y, at tohealthwiththat.com. Okay, now let's talk about the factors that play into depression that are largely fixable. Number 1 is low folate and vitamin B12 status. So this link holds true whether the person in question has an MTHFR issue or not. Lower nutritional status regarding folate and B12 means a higher risk of depression across the board. Also, higher serum B12 and folate are shown to predict better treatment outcomes. MTHFR itself is actually potentially a separate factor, although we're not 100% sure. So it's clear that low folate levels increase risk of depression and that MTHFR increases the risk of low folate levels. But it isn't totally clear if MTHFR increases the risk of depression independently from folate status. There are several ways that it could. Obviously, MTHFR has an impact on neurotransmitters and DNA methylation, which can boost depression by itself. But we still don't know if MTHFR, independent of folate status, is a predictor. Also questionable is C677T status in particular. So there's a meta-analysis showing a link between C677T status and depression, but the fascinating thing is that another meta-analysis shows that the strength of the link between those two things, like the depression and the C677T, changes in different geographical areas. So that could be due to local changes in diet, but it could also represent a big wildcard factor that tells us that we don't really know what's going on here. Outside of those things, high homocysteine. So, of course, high homocysteine can be the result of low folate status also, but there's a clear link between high homocysteine and higher levels of depression, and also high homocysteine and MTHFR. So, Inflammation is another one. In a classic chicken or egg scenario, inflammation and depression are terminally linked. If inflammation rises, so too does depression. And likewise, if depression worsens, inflammation does as well. So, with MTHFR, we have a greater tendency towards both. So it matters to keep your inflammatory processes in check. Oxidative stress is yet another one of these. Oxidative stress is your body's total level of free radicals, right? Those are the reactive oxygen species. Studies show that people with higher levels of markers for oxidative stress will also have higher levels of depression and poorer response to treatment. So one of the common factors we're seeing, if, it's folate or homocysteine or inflammation or oxidative stress, then those people are also not responding to treatment. So in these studies, what they're saying is the drugs aren't compensating for other factors. They only fix it if it's a neurotransmitter problem. So remember with the oxidative stress that with MTHFR, we do have the potential to have lower glutathione, which is the master antioxidant, meaning that we may be prone to higher levels of oxidative stress. Another factor is insulin resistance and blood sugar issues. So research is really mixed in this area. There's a clear link between depression and diabetes, but insulin resistance, which is one of the stepping stones on the path to type 2 diabetes, is a little bit less clear. The immediate and obvious link between blood sugar fluctuations and mood is a whole lot less difficult to see. Basically, anybody with a hungry toddler can tell you about that one. The jump between hungry and hangry is a really short one. Again, with MTHFR, we do have a slightly increased tendency towards blood sugar issues, insulin resistance, and ultimately diabetes. And hormones. Low estrogen in women is linked to perimenopausal depression. Low testosterone in men is likewise linked to depression. High estrogen presents mood and behavioral shifts, and high progesterone brings on the waterworks between naps. What is clear is that balanced hormones certainly lead to better and steadier moods, where fluctuations or abnormalities might put us in the roughs. MTHFR is, of course, involved in hormone regulation and processing, so righting that balance can be really highly productive, especially if you notice, for women particularly, that your mood tends to fluctuate with your monthly cycle. Sleep. So a giant link exists between sleep quality and depression, and most of us have firsthand experience of that. Is anybody else's household entirely grumpy if their sleep is interrupted? Because mine is. The other one is sedentary lifestyle. This isn't anything in particular to do with MTHFR, which is great news. But there is, as a human, a huge link between sedentary behavior and depression, and also between exercise and improved quality of life, mentally, emotionally, and physically. It is one of the basic things that you can do for depression that has a huge impact, and in many studies, the impact of exercise is as significant as the impact of taking pharmaceutical medication. So each of the factors that we're talking about is measurable and trackable and highly treatable, with or without an MTHFR mutation. Each of those things can be worked on independently, but also any step towards a healthier lifestyle is going to help in many of those areas, and a lot of those areas overlap. For example, balancing your methylation, which for us MTHFR folks usually means either taking a good form of folate, or if we don't tolerate folate, then finding a good workaround, helps to raise folate levels, which is, check 1 for one category, reduce homocysteine, check, and reduce both inflammation, check, and oxidative stress, check. So, one change is influencing 4 giant contributing factors to depression. Ultimately, that will influence neurotransmitter production. Check, 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 right? So does that mean balancing your methylation is going to fix your depression completely? Not necessarily. But it does get us a lot closer to the goal and also improves your chances of responding better to other therapeutic interventions. So, if your methylation is balanced, you have a better chance of actually having a pharmaceutical intervention that works. So from this list that we've talked about, we have a number of natural treatments for depression. There are also 2 special factors that we haven't talked about yet. One pertains more strongly to MTHFR folks, and the other is just kind of a human nature problem. The first is childhood trauma. A significant portion of depression in adults stems from childhood trauma, and unfortunately, people with the MTHFR mutations may be more susceptible to lifelong depressive tendencies from childhood traumas than the average person would be. It is fixable, but it takes work, right? And that could be self-guided help through spiritual seeking, prayer, meditation, self-healing techniques. It could also be professional help in the form of therapy, hypnosis, EMDR, or a myriad of other options. The other big category is habit. So this conversation is very neglected, and so this is next week's topic. We're going to talk all about the habits involved in depression and anxiety. Any mental state, no matter what else contributes to it, has the potential for a habit component. So that means depression, anxiety, obsessive thoughts, intrusive thoughts, whatever it is. And sometimes you have to actually retrain yourself to break the habit in the same way that you would train any other bad habit. I feel like All of these factors could appear daunting on one hand, but if you look at it another way, it also opens up so many opportunities for healing that are really overlooked. It can be incredibly discouraging when your doctor runs out of options for depression, but chances are they haven't even scratched the surface of this list. Typically, doctors look at sleep, blood sugar, neurotransmitters. You have an opportunity to dive a little deeper. So thanks for listening today. I do hope you'll join me for the MTHFR 101 beta course. And talk next week.